My son handed me eviction papers while the funeral flowers were still fresh. He thought $7 million bought him a life of luxury. He was wrong. It just bought him a 14-day countdown to foreclosure. And I was the one standing on the courthouse steps to place the winning bid. My name is Maeve Thornton. I am 61 years old, and I live, for now, in the suburbs of Aurora, Colorado. Or perhaps I should say I did live here. The house is cold today, filled with the cloying, sweet smell of lilies starting to turn. It is the day of my husband's funeral. Henry, my husband of 40 years, was a contractor. He built things that lasted, with hands that were rough and sure. He died of a stroke, a sudden, brutal event that cleaved my life in two. My son, Caleb, is 38. For the last 10 years, he has specialized not in building, but in spending. His wife, Savannah, is a walking, talking Pinterest board, a woman whose entire aesthetic is aspirational. She wore a black dress to the funeral that was, I am certain, both new and incredibly expensive. After the service, our family lawyer, Rufus Grant, stopped by the house. He spoke quickly, his voice a low monotone about the necessities of probate, the clean transfer of assets. Henry, bless his trusting heart, had left everything in a straightforward will. I watched Caleb as Rufus spoke. My son wasn't grieving. He was impatient. He nodded with the air of a man confirming a delivery, a man who felt his inheritance was long overdue. When the last of the mourners had finally trickled out, leaving behind a kitchen counter laden with uneaten casseroles, the real business began. I was rinsing a coffee cup when Caleb entered the kitchen. Savannah hovered behind him, a silent, fragrant shadow, the smell of her perfume, something sharp and floral, cut right through the scent of baked ham and funereal flowers. "Mom," Caleb started, his tone clipped, businesslike. He slid a glossy, bound folder across the granite island. It wasn't a book of condolences. It was a full appraisal of my home. "We need to discuss the financial optimization of the estate." I just looked at him. Financial optimization. Henry's ashes were not yet cold, and my son was talking like an analyst terminating a bad asset. "This house is too much for you. Maeve," Savannah chimed in, her voice syrupy with false concern. She even placed a hand on my forearm, her nails perfectly almond-shaped. "And frankly, it's just wasted equity. We found the most wonderful place for you, Sunset Haven. It's lovely, really. So many activities. It's just great for seniors." A knife. That's what her words were. Caleb didn't wait for my response. He produced another folded paper from his suit jacket. "This is just a formality," he said, pushing it toward me. I unfolded it. The header was clear. Notice to terminate tenancy. Legally, since I'm the new owner of the asset, I have to provide this. He continued, refusing to meet my eyes. "It gives you 10 days. I've already scheduled the movers for next Wednesday. It will be much easier for you this way. Just pack what you need." 10 days. He was giving me 10 days to vacate the home Henry built for us. I said nothing. My throat was too tight to form words. But the old habits, the ones honed over 30 years as a risk manager at the Prairie Sun Community Credit Union, kicked in. My mind began to tick. Date noted. Time 4:30 p.m. Witnesses, Caleb Thornton, Savannah Thornton. Key phrases, financial optimization. New owner? 10 days. They took my silence as agreement. Or perhaps they simply did not care. Caleb nodded, satisfied. Good. I'm glad we got that handled. They left, off to their new life, presumably. I remained in the kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I walked into the living room and stared at the fireplace. The ashes from last night's fire were grey and cold. I thought of my career. I had audited hundreds of accounts, uncovered fraud, and managed millions in high-risk assets. This feeling was familiar. It wasn't just grief. It was the beginning of an audit, and I had no intention of failing it. I did not cry. Grief was a resource I could not afford to spend, not with a 10-day clock running. The moment the door clicked shut behind Caleb, I went straight to Henry's study. Behind his favourite painting, a stark landscape of the plains, was the wall safe. The combination was my birthday, an irony that now felt like acid. Inside, beneath Henry's meticulous files and old bonds, was a newer, thinner manila folder. It felt wrong. I opened it. The signature on the loan documents was not Henry's. It was Caleb's, looping and arrogant. It was a debt agreement, complete with an aggressive repayment schedule, to a firm I'd never heard of Ironwood Capital. The collateral was a property I did not recognize. Willow Crest. I recognized the name. It was a new, gaudy development, a neighborhood of glass and steel boxes pretending to be homes. I found the purchase agreement. My breath hitched. Caleb had put almost nothing down on a multi-million-dollar mansion. The rest, the vast majority, was a high-interest bridge loan from Ironwood. I scanned the fine print, my old risk management instincts taking over. And there it was, a confession of judgment clause, a devastating amateur mistake. If Caleb missed a single payment, Ironwood didn't need to sue him. They could just file a paper and seize the asset. The problems were layered, like bad accounting. I moved from the safe to the pile of unopened mail on the sideboard. Mail Caleb had clearly tossed aside. There were certified letters, sealed in plastic warning sleeves, notifications of non-compliance from the Willow Crest Homeowners Association. Caleb, a contractor's son, was receiving building violations. His crews were slow, the work subpar. The HOA had been fining him, heavily, for months. Then I found the letter that stopped my blood. It was from the Arapahoe County Treasurer. Delinquent property taxes. Last year's. Unpaid. A bright red stamp dominated the page. Notice of public tax lion auction. The date was set. It was exactly 14 days from today. My knees felt weak. I gripped the edge of the desk. I needed leverage. Something to stop this eviction. I went back to the safe and frantically searched for the file on my house, the one Henry built. I remembered the conversation. Years ago, after a friend of mine had been widowed and displaced, Henry had promised to add a lifetime estate clause to the deed, guaranteeing I could live here until my death, no matter who owned the paper. I found the draft. He had written it. He had even signed it, but he had never gotten it notarized. It was a worthless piece of paper. A promise, not a contract. The pain of that oversight was a physical blow, sharper than Caleb's cruelty. I picked up the phone. I dialed Rufus Grant. "Rufus," I said. My voice was steel. "I need the original, finalized copy of Henry's will, and I need every single addendum, every trust document, and every associated file. I need them within the hour." There was a long silence on the line, the sound of a man caught. "Maeve," Rufus began, his voice heavy with caution. "I was hoping Caleb would discuss the arrangements with you gently. Gently is not a legal term. Send the files. Maeve. Henry wanted Caleb to finally stand on his own 2 feet. He was worried about him. He structured the estate. How? Rufus sighed. The house transferred to Caleb immediately upon death. You know that. But the liquid assets, Maeve, the cash, the bulk of it, nearly $7 million, was transferred directly to Caleb's personal account. I hung up. $7 million. He had been given $7 million, and he was already so deep in debt that he couldn't even pay his property taxes. He hadn't just bought a mansion. He'd bought an anchor. I walked to the kitchen calendar, the one still showing Henry's doctor appointments. I took a red pen and drew a hard circle around the auction date. 14 days. I went to my laptop and checked the state statutes. Depending on the HOA's bylaws, their lien sale could potentially take priority even over the bank. Caleb wasn't just in trouble. He was cornered. He wanted this house to optimize his finances. He could have it. I walked to the front door and looked at the deadbolt. Then I turned around. I went back to the study, pulled out my old leather-bound risk ledger from my credit union days, and clicked my pen. I didn't need to change the locks on the house. I just changed the lock on my notebook. The 10 days passed not in grief, but in logistics. On the final day, exactly as scheduled, a large moving van pulled up to my curb. Caleb stepped out of his gleaming new truck, not in a suit this time, but in expensive athleisure. He didn't come alone. The movers were one thing. Savannah was another. She was holding her phone up, the screen facing her, already talking. Hey guys, we're here, she was saying to her followers, her voice a practiced, sympathetic murmur. It's a really, really hard day. We're moving Maeve into a more manageable living situation. It's just so much for her. You know, rattling around in this huge old place all alone. We're doing what's best. Mom, Caleb said, his voice loud, probably for the live stream's benefit. We're just going to pack the essentials. The movers will handle the rest. Just get what you need for a bit. 2 suitcases should be fine. I looked at the men already unfolding blankets on my lawn. I looked at Savannah, panning her camera toward the front door as if it were a historical landmark of sorrow. I had already packed. I had 2 suitcases and a banker's box waiting by the door. Caleb handed me a clipboard. This is just a temporary release, acknowledging you've vacated and we're taking possession. I took the pen. On the signature line, I signed my name, and then I wrote, clear and firm. 2 words under protest. Caleb's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what it says, I replied, my voice just low enough not to be picked up by Savannah's microphone. Before I walked out, I took my own phone. I took a photo of the signed paper. I took a photo of the moving truck's license plate. I took a photo of the 2 movers. I documented the exact time, 10:04 a.m., and forwarded every image to Rufus Grant with a single-line email confirming dispossession under protest. My box is in the garage, I told Caleb. I'll get it. I walked past them. The garage was my last stop. Henry's workbench was in the corner, a place Caleb had never shown interest in. But stacked beneath it, hidden under a tarp, was a messy pile of invoices and project folders from Willow Crest. He hadn't just been hiding them from the bank, he'd been hiding them from his father. I scanned them quickly. My suspicions were confirmed. Unpaid invoices. Estimates for repairs that had never been completed. a blistering email from a stone mason demanding payment, a roofer threatening a mechanic's lien. Caleb wasn't just late on his loan, he was stiffing his own subcontractors. And then I saw it. Tucked inside a blueprints tube, another official envelope from the county court. A summons. Caleb was due for a mandatory hearing regarding the Willow Crest HOA violations. The hearing was in 5 days. I slid the summons into my box, along with the most damning of the unpaid invoices. I picked up the box, grabbed my 2 suitcases, and walked out of my home for the last time. I did not go to Sunset Haven. I drove to the other side of Aurora, to a quiet neighborhood of small, tidy brick houses. I parked in front of Lydia Morales' home. Lydia and I had started at the credit union in the same year. She'd spent 20 years in the Arapahoe County Land Registry before that. She knew where every single document in the county was buried. She opened the door before I even knocked. "Coffee's hot," was all she said. Lydia's guest room became my office. We didn't waste time on sympathies. We went to work. By that evening, her dining room table was covered in printouts. We had created a map, a legal dissection of Caleb's mansion. "It's a house of cards, Maeve," Lydia said, tapping a red pen on a printout. "Layer 1, the county tax lien. That's the most senior. They get paid first, no matter what." "Layer 2, I said, pointing to another sheet. "The HOA. They've already got a judgment. Their sale is scheduled right after the tax auction." "Layer 3, the mechanic's liens. This roofer is serious. If he files, he could cloud the title for everyone." "And Layer 4, Lydia finished. "The bank. Ironwood Capital. With that confession of judgment, they're last in line, and they know it. They'll bid just to protect their investment. But they won't go high. They don't want the house. They just want their money back." The next morning, I was at Frontier Plains Bank, an old local institution that still valued relationships. I didn't ask for a loan. I opened a new business account under a name I had registered online the night before, Cottonwood Ridge Holdings, LLC. I transferred my own liquid savings, my entire emergency fund, into it as the initial deposit. My last stop of the day was the county administrative building. I didn't go to the treasurer's office. I went to the permitting and inspections department. I filled out a simple form, registering my new LLC as a good faith subcontractor interested in bidding on public remediation projects. It was an obscure little loophole, but it meant one crucial thing: my LLC would now receive automated email notifications of any new violations, liens, or status changes posted against the Willow Crest property. That night, Lydia and I looked at the finished map. The layers of debt were choking the property. It looked like a building caught in a hailstorm, glass shattering on every side. Caleb thought he had a mansion. What he had was a liability. The HOA mediation hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on Tuesday. I attended, sitting in the back row of the small municipal courtroom. It was a dull, procedural room that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. Caleb, naturally, did not show up. Savannah was likely too busy curating content to attend a boring legal proceeding. The mediator called his name twice. The HOA's attorney, a sharp woman in a crisp suit, didn't hesitate. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor, given the defendant's failure to appear, we move for a default judgment." The judge scanned the file. "Granted." The gavel tapped. A flat, final sound. The fines, plus steep, accumulating attorney's fees, were now a formal debt attached to the property. The judgment green-lit their own foreclosure sale. This was the second layer of the trap. And Caleb had just walked right past the warning signs. I spent that afternoon not hiding, but preparing. I went to the county sheriff's department and asked for the office handling civil enforcement. I ended up with a deputy constable, a man who looked tired but was meticulously organized. I placed my small digital recorder on his desk. Per Colorado state law, I'm informing you this conversation is being recorded for my records, I stated. He just nodded. Fine by me, ma'am? I didn't ask for favors. I asked for process. What is the exact procedure for a tax sale eviction, assuming a successful bid? What are the required fees for service? What level of appraisal is required before the sale commences? He explained the timeline, his voice a monotone. He covered the bid, the certificate of purchase, and the statutory redemption period. I learned the exact cost to have an eviction notice served. $45. That evening, the email notification I had set up chimed. A new filing against the Willowcrest parcel. Ironwood Capital, the bridge lender, had officially filed a notice of acceleration. This was not a standard default warning. They were calling the entire multi-million-dollar loan due immediately. The reason cited was clear. Failure to maintain the asset, referencing the HOA violations and the unpaid taxes. They knew the house was bleeding value, and they knew the tax sale was coming. They were trying, desperately, to get in line for whatever scraps were left. The next morning, Arapahoe County posted the finalized list for the upcoming tax auction. I did not even have to scroll. Caleb's property was the first item. Parcel number, address, and the amount due. The base taxes, plus penalties and interest, had ballooned. It was the largest delinquency on the docket. I forwarded the auction list and the Ironwood acceleration notice to Rufus Grant. He called me within 5 minutes. Maeve, this is a hornet's nest, he said, his voice strained. These sales are messy. You've got the bank, the HOA, and the county all fighting for the same piece of meat. You could lose everything you put in. Don't be reckless. Don't do this out of spite. I'm not being reckless. Rufus, I said calmly. And I'm not acting out of spite. I'm acting as a risk manager. This is an investment. What kind of investment? A distressed asset. And I happen to have perfect knowledge of its liabilities. I'm not risking anything. I am preparing. I hung up. Preparation required data. I could not bid based on the $7 million Caleb received. I needed to know the real cost. I used the contacts Henry had cultivated for 40 years. I called an independent contractor, a man named Sal, who Henry had always trusted. I paid him cash for a drive-by structural and liability assessment. I gave him the file of Caleb's unpaid invoices. Sal called me back 2 hours later. Maeve, it's a disaster painted pretty. The roofline is already showing issues. And if that stone mason hasn't been paid, his lien is solid. The whole back patio is probably non-compliant. To fix what I can see, and what these invoices imply, you're looking at a minimum of $100,000 in immediate repairs. Probably more. I thanked him and added that number to my ledger. I now had my ceiling. I knew exactly how much the house wasn't worth. I went back to Frontier Plains Bank. I sat down with the branch manager, the same man who had approved my first car loan in 1980. I did not ask for a loan. I requested a letter of credit for the auction, secured by the funds already in my Cottonwood Ridge Holdings account. It was a guarantee, a certified promise that my bid was good up to my designated maximum. He had it drawn up in an hour. One final piece of legal armor. I was worried Caleb or Savannah might show up at the auction and create a scene. If they recognized me, they might try to interfere, to bid against me out of pure ego. I could not risk that. I had Rufus draft a specific, limited power of attorney, authorizing Lydia Morales to bid on behalf of Cottonwood Ridge Holdings, LLC. She would be my proxy, my paddle holder. She knew the county system, and no one would recognize her. That night, at Lydia's dining table, I opened my old risk ledger. It was a simple grid: legal, financial, personnel, HOA judgment check, tax lien status confirmed, bank acceleration noted, repair estimate secured, bid ceiling calculated, letter of credit obtained, proxy bidder authorized. Every box in my audit was checked. Every contingency was covered. I closed the book, my mind finally quiet. The auction was a fixed point, and my life was now a countdown. 12 days out. I was at the county records office, not Lydia's dining table. I pulled the building permits for Willow Crest. The house was an Instagram filter. The facade was perfect, all glass and expensive wood. But the permits told the truth. The HVAC system was a builder-grade, low-efficiency model, already under strain. The roofing materials were the cheapest permissible by code, not the premium slate listed on the sales brochure. It was, as Sal had suspected, a house built to be flipped, not lived in. 10 days out. My LLC's notification system pinged. Ironwood Capital had sent its final, desperate notice of default and intent to sell. It was a formality, a scream into the void. Their lien was fourth in line. They were buried. I filed the email. That same afternoon, Lydia forwarded me a public social media post. It was Savannah, posing beside a brand new luxury SUV, the kind with gull-wing doors. The caption read, "Leveling up. Hard work pays off." Caleb was in the background, smiling, holding the keys. They were spending the last of the $7 million, oblivious to the guillotine hanging over their heads. 9 days out. I took a meeting with the private firm that managed the county's public auctions. I wasn't Maeve Thornton, grieving widow. I was the managing member of Cottonwood Ridge Holdings. I asked about bidding procedure, certified funds, and closing timelines. "I need to confirm the priority of liens," I said, my pen poised over my notebook. "Taxes are paid first, correct?" The manager nodded. "Always. The tax sale wipes the slate. And the HOA judgment. They are second. If the winning bid exceeds the tax debt, the overage goes to them." I also clarified the post-sale redemption process. Caleb would have a statutory window to buy the house back from me, but he would have to pay my full purchase price, plus interest and any costs I'd incurred. He would need cash. He was burning his 7 days out. Lydia came home from her own research trip to the city utilities department. She spread a large infrastructure map on the table. "You're not going to like this. Maeve." She pointed to a section of the blueprint. "The sewer line. It's misaligned with the main city connection. It was a builder error, a lazy shortcut." "It's not failing yet," she said. "But it will. And it's a $38,000 fix. Minimum." I looked at my ledger, found my bid ceiling, and subtracted $38,000. My maximum price just dropped. 5 days out. Rufus called. "The LLC is finalized. The EIN is active." I spent the morning at Frontier Plains Bank, meeting with the escrow department. With the LLC and the letter of credit, I opened a dedicated escrow account. The funds were now officially staged, ready for immediate wire transfer upon a successful bid. 4 days out. I met with a title insurance agent. This was the trickiest part. I need a conditional policy, I explained. One that takes effect the moment the certificate of purchase is issued to Cottonwood Ridge Holdings. He was hesitant, until I showed him the full file, the tax lien, the HOA judgment, the Ironwood default, the infrastructure report. He saw I wasn't a gambler. I was an underwriter. He drew up the policy. It was expensive, and the exclusions were precise, listing every known lien. But it ensured that no unknown lien, no ghost from Caleb's bad business, could come back to haunt me. 3 days out. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Savannah. I know what you are doing. You are trying to ruin us. Henry would be disgusted. Stop it." I took a screenshot, saved it to my evidence file, and then blocked the number. I did not reply. 2 days out. A formal email arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize. It was a cease and desist letter, full of bluster and threats, accusing me of tortious interference in Caleb's financial affairs. They threatened injunctions. They threatened to sue me for emotional distress. I forwarded it to Rufus. His reply, which he copied me on, was a thing of beauty. It was not a defense. It was a formal spoliation letter, reminding Caleb's new lawyer of their legal duty to preserve all evidence, including all financial statements, communications, and electronic data related to the Willow Crest property and the $7 million inheritance, pending likely litigation. The threats stopped instantly. 1 day out. The work was done. My numbers were triple-checked. My legal shields were in place. Lydia and I ate a quiet dinner of soup and bread. I wouldn't sleep in my own car or a motel. I was staying in Lydia's guest room, the nerve center of my operation. I set 5 alarms on my phone, starting at 5 a.m. I would not be late. I would not be rushed. I would not let anyone, least of all my own son, rob me of the timing. The house was ready. I was ready. The auction hall at the Arapahoe County Courthouse was packed. It was a standing-room-only crowd of seasoned investors in cheap suits, contractors with muddy boots, and a few men who had the dead-eyed look of hard money lenders. This was a room of professionals, here to feed on the mistakes of others. I sat in the 3rd row, Lydia beside me. She held the numbered paddle for Cottonwood Ridge Holdings. I was just an anonymous woman in a practical coat. I scanned the room one last time. My eyes searched for a tall, 38-year-old man in an expensive jacket or a woman live-streaming the event. They were not there. Caleb was not present to witness the dismemberment of his new life. After a dozen smaller, uninteresting parcels were sold, the auctioneer cleared his throat. "All right, next lot. This is the big one, folks." He read the parcel identification number, a long string of digits I had already memorized. Commonly known as the property at... He read the Willow Crest address, my son's address. Opening bid is the amount of the tax lien, penalties, and fees. We will start at... He named the exact figure from the county treasurer's letter. Immediately, a man in the front row, one of the cheap suits, raised his paddle. "Here," he said. Another man, one of the contractors, countered. They went back and forth, pushing the price up in lazy $10,000 increments. It was a predictable rhythm, 2 sharks circling. I sat with my hands clasped in my lap, my breathing even. I watched the numbers climb, ticking past the tax debt, past the HOA judgment. They were now in the territory of pure speculation. The price hit a number just shy of my calculated threshold. The contractor bid. The suit hesitated, shook his head, and put his paddle down. "Going once," the auctioneer chanted. This was the moment. The room was quiet. I gave Lydia a single, short nod. Lydia raised her paddle. Her voice was clear and steady. She stated our bid. It was not a round number. It was the precise, calculated figure from my ledger, my maximum ceiling, minus the $38,000 sewer repair, minus the $100,000 structural fixes. The auctioneer paused, surprised by the odd number. The entire room turned to look at us. The contractor in the front row stared, annoyed by the new competition. He had been bidding on market value. My bid showed I knew the real value. He squinted, trying to decide if we were bluffing. He raised his paddle. "Add 1,000, he snapped. He was testing me. I didn't flinch. I nodded at Lydia again, just as calmly as before. Lydia raised her paddle. "Add 500. It was a tiny increment, a bid that made no sense in a multi-million-dollar sale. It was also a fatal signal. It told the contractor, and everyone else in that room, that I had a hard number. I had done the math down to the dollar, and I would not be bidding on emotion. I was not gambling. I was collecting. The contractor stared at me. I met his gaze, my face impassive. He was recalculating. He saw a woman who knew something he didn't. He saw risk he couldn't quantify. "Going once?" the auctioneer called, his eyes on the contractor. "Going twice." The contractor let out a puff of air and angrily waved his hand. "No." The auctioneer's gaze snapped back to Lydia. "Sold." The gavel cracked, a sound so loud it seemed to shake the room. "To the paddle in the third row, for—" He read back my precise, odd-numbered bid. The room erupted in noise, shuffling, and coughing as people prepared for the next lot. It was over. I stood up. Lydia and I walked directly to the clerk's table at the side of the room. I signed the certificate of purchase as the managing member of Cottonwood Ridge Holdings. I paid the required 10% deposit on the spot from my LLC account and handed the clerk my wiring instructions from Frontier Plains Bank for the remainder. Due by 5 p.m.? The clerk, a weary-looking woman with a pen behind her ear, stamped the papers. She looked at her sheet. "You know," she whispered, "this same parcel is up for the HOA foreclosure sale next week. You cleared their lien, but the sale is still on the books. You planning to clear that title, too?" "Yes," I said. "I'll be there?" I took my receipt and walked out of the hall. I had just reached the main corridor, the sound of the next auction starting behind me, when a voice shrieked my name. "Maeve." Savannah was running toward me, her face pale and blotchy beneath her makeup. She wasn't holding a phone. "What did you do?" she screamed, her voice echoing on the marble. "What did you just do? That is our house." I stopped. I looked at her, at the panic in her eyes, at the woman who had watched my son evict me. I held up the stamped receipt from the county treasurer. "Not anymore," I said, and I walked away. The certificate of purchase was temporary. The deed was final. By the next morning, I was at the county recorder's office. I filed the deed in the name of Cottonwood Ridge Holdings, LLC. An hour later, a locksmith I had pre-booked was at the Willow Crest mansion. He removed the expensive but standard locks Caleb had installed and replaced them with a commercial-grade smart lock system. I changed the code 3 times before settling on one. I then walked the perimeter of the property, driving simple, metal, no trespassing signs into the manicured lawn. My next act was one of legal necessity, not kindness. I had Rufus draft a formal notice, sent via certified mail to Caleb's last known address, my old house. It was polite, almost sterile, informing him that the property had a new legal owner and that he had 48 hours to schedule a supervised time to retrieve his personal belongings. Any items left after that window would be considered abandoned and disposed of. He did not wait 48 hours. He arrived that afternoon. I saw the 2 vehicles pull up from the window, Caleb's new SUV and a white van. Caleb stormed out, but he wasn't alone. He had 2 men with him, both carrying professional video cameras. Savannah was not with them. This was not a lifestyle shoot. It was an ambush. She's in there. My mother. She stole my house. Caleb was shouting before he even reached the driveway. The cameras were rolling, aimed at the front door. I was prepared. As Caleb began pounding on the door, another car pulled up. A uniformed county constable, whom I had hired that morning for civil standby, stepped out. He stood calmly at the base of the walkway. I opened the door. I did not step outside. "Maeve, what is this? You can't do this!" Caleb yelled, gesturing wildly for the cameras to get closer. Tell them how you stole my house." One of the cameramen pointed his lens directly at my face. "Ma'am, can you respond to your son's allegation?" I held up my hand, not in defense, but to ask for silence. I held out 2 documents. The first was the official certificate of sale from the Arapahoe County auction. The second was the stamped receipt from the treasurer's office, showing the purchase price paid in full. "This property was seized by the county for non-payment of taxes," I said, my voice clear and steady for the microphones. "It was sold at a legal, public auction. My company, Cottonwood Ridge Holdings, was the winning bidder. This is the county receipt. This is the legal certificate of sale. We are the new owners." Caleb's face went white. "She's lying. It's complicated. She manipulated the system." I looked past my son, directly at the cameraman. "Are you accusing the Arapahoe County Treasurer's office of running a fraudulent auction?" The cameraman's face hardened. This was not the family drama he'd been promised. This was a legal fact. He lowered his camera. "We're done here, man," he said to the other operator. "What, no keep filming her?" Caleb yelled. "We can't, sir," the first man said, already walking back to the van. "She's got the county paperwork. This is a property dispute. We're not getting involved in this." They packed their gear and left. Caleb just stood there, his hands clenched, utterly defeated, on a driveway he no longer owned. "You have a scheduled appointment." "Caleb?" I asked. He just stared at me, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. Then he turned and stormed back to his SUV, spraying gravel as he peeled out. I closed the door. The constable waited for 10 minutes, then tipped his hat and left. I was finally alone in the house. I began my audit. It was worse than I thought. The infinity pool Savannah had posted so many pictures of had a long, spiderweb crack in the foundation. The air inside was thick with a damp, musty smell. The cheap HVAC system was already fostering mold. The kitchen cabinets, which looked like custom oak online, were particle board covered in a cheap, bubbled veneer. I walked from room to room, my footsteps echoing. I made a list. I locked the doors to the empty, damaged bedrooms, sealing off the areas with the worst mold. I made 3 calls, one to a remediation specialist, one to a roofer, and one to Sal, the contractor. That evening, I sent one last certified letter to Caleb. It was the formal statutory notice of his right of redemption. It informed him, in cold legal language, of the exact amount he would have to pay to buy the house back my full purchase price, plus interest, plus the costs I had already incurred for the locks and the constable. It was his last legal chance, and it required a sum of money I knew, with certainty, he no longer possessed. Rufus called as I was leaving the property. "The deed is filed," he said. "Now, I suggest we move it one more time. Put it into a land trust. It will make Cottonwood Ridge the beneficiary, but obscure the ownership from public records. It will keep your name, and his, out of the headlines. It's cleaner." I agreed. The next morning, before the remediation crew arrived, I drove a single, small, professional sign into the front lawn, just next to the no trespassing notice. It was white, with blue lettering. It read, "Property under new management." The house began to give up its secrets, not all at once, but in layers, like peeling wallpaper in a damp room. The mold remediation team, while tearing out a section of drywall in the master closet, found a small, personal safe hidden behind the paneling. It was cheap, the kind you buy at an office supply store. It was also unlocked. Inside was not cash, but more paper. It was another loan agreement, this one not with Ironwood, but with a name that made my blood run cold, Red Mesa Lending. They were notorious. They were not just hard money lenders, they were predators. I read the terms. The interest rate was usurious, north of 30%, and it included a clause that allowed them to seize not just the property, but personal assets upon default. Caleb had borrowed heavily from them, just weeks ago, likely to cover the payments he owed to Ironwood. He had been robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Paul was a loan shark. The moment my LLC's ownership was filed with the county, the floodgates opened. The roofer and the stonemason, who had been holding back, officially filed their mechanics' liens. With a solvent owner now on the deed, they had a target. The electrician followed a day later. The total in liens alone climbed to over $60,000. Caleb hadn't just promised to pay them. He had actively dodged their calls for months. While sorting through the mess of papers in the home office, a room that was all style and zero function, I found the corporate binder for Savannah Designs, LLC. Tucked inside was a consulting contract. It was between her company and Caleb's construction firm. She had been billing him and paying herself a project design and marketing fee of $10,000 a month, drawn directly from his business account. She wasn't just his wife. She was a highly paid vendor, draining his funds while he was already defaulting on his taxes. The source of the cash burn became sickeningly clear when I found the bank statements. There were massive wire transfers, not to suppliers, but to online accounts associated with cryptocurrency exchanges. My son hadn't just spent the $7 million, he had gambled it. He had tried to become a day trader, a crypto tycoon, and like thousands of others, his accounts had been liquidated in a market crash. The luxury SUV, the designer clothes, the mansion. It was all funded by debt, a desperate attempt to maintain an image that had already evaporated. The most dangerous discovery came from Sal, my contractor. He was inspecting the cracked pool foundation. "Maeve, this isn't just a crack," he said, his voice grim. This is fraud. He showed me the paperwork he'd pulled. The original inspector's report had flagged the pool shell as non-compliant, but the final certificate of completion, filed with the county, was clean. This signature, he said, pointing to the inspector's name, is a forgery. Caleb, or someone working for him, faked the sign-off. This was no longer a civil matter. This was a potential criminal offence. I brought the forged document to Rufus. His face hardened. This is the end of the line. Maeve, he said. You could ruin him with this. You could send him to jail. What do I do with it? I asked. You hold it, he said, his voice firm. You keep your moral high ground. We are not here to annihilate him. We are here to secure your asset. We file what is necessary to clear the title, the liens, the debts. We do not use this. Unless we are forced to. Don't become him. Maeve. I received a new text from another new number. It was Savannah. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone. Maeve, please. I don't care about the house, but my bags, my collection. They are in the closet. Please, I can be in and out in 10 minutes, I replied. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. You will have 30 minutes. You will be supervised. You will not cause a scene. She arrived exactly on time, alone, in a rented sedan. She looked smaller, stripped of her designer armor. I stood by the open front door as she walked, head down, straight to the master closet. She came out 6 minutes later, carrying 3 large, very expensive handbags. She wouldn't look at me. Thank you, she whispered, and practically ran to her car. The following week, Rufus received the final email from Caleb's lawyer. The threatened lawsuit for fraudulent asset seizure was being dropped. The attorney formally withdrew, citing a fundamental disagreement on the merits of the case. He had attached a copy of the county auction report to his email. He knew the case was unwinnable. The final communication came 2 nights later. My phone lit up with a text from Caleb. One short, blunt sentence. What do you want from me? I looked at the message for a long time. I thought of the $7 million, of the eviction, of the faked documents. I typed my reply. For you to make one right choice. I did not meet him at the mansion. I did not meet him at my old home. I replied to his text with an address and a time. It was a small, windowless conference room in an executive suite building, rented by the hour. It was the most neutral territory I could find. When he arrived, he looked thinner, and for the first time, he looked his age. The arrogant gloss was gone. He wore a simple button-down shirt, not a designer label. He sat down opposite me at the cheap laminate table. Between us, I placed a single file folder, not the stack of his debts, not the forged documents, but a new set of architectural plans. He just stared at it. What's this? This is the plan for the property, I said. I slid the top page toward him. The title block was clear. Willow Crest Commons, an independent living community. You're turning it into a nursing home? He asked, his voice flat. No, I said. Not a nursing home. A group home for independent seniors. People like me, who want to live in a community but not in an institution. People who, perhaps, have been displaced from their own homes. He looked down, absorbing the implication. The remediation is done. I continued. The liens are settled. The property is clean. But it needs a massive refit to be compliant. The kitchen needs to be commercial grade. The pool needs to be filled in and replaced with a therapy garden. Every bathroom needs to be retrofitted. It needs a project manager. I let that hang in the air. I am offering you the job, I said. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're offering me a job? A position. It's for 12 months. You will be the on-site project manager. You will coordinate every contractor, every inspection, and every purchase order. How much? What's the salary? There is no salary, I said. You will be provided with a small room on site, the one by the laundry, and a food stipend. You will receive a performance bonus, paid only when milestones are met on time and under budget. Every single invoice, every receipt, will go through a third-party audit. My audit. He was silent, processing. And there are conditions, I said, sliding a second paper across the table. 1. You will sign a personal commitment with a payment plan to restore every dollar owed to the subcontractors you cheated. 2. You will enroll in and complete a community financial literacy course that I will be coordinating at the local credit union. And if I do all this? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. After the 12 months, what happens then? If you complete the project successfully, and if Willowcrest Commons becomes cash flow positive, I will fund a small trust in your name. It will not contain cash. It will contain enough seed money to buy tools, to get your contractor's license reinstated, to capitalize a small, legitimate, bonded business. I will give you the tools to work, not the money to spend. He stared at the plans. I have to talk to Savannah. No, I said. You have to make this choice. She already made hers. He looked at me, knowing I knew. He had already lost her. The silence in the room stretched out. He was a man with no money, no home, and no prospects. This was the only door open to him. He finally focused. The first spark of the man Henry raised showing through. The audit, he said. You'll be monitoring it. Every single invoice. I replied. He looked at the plans, at the conditions, and then at me. He nodded once. Okay. The next day, we met in Rufus Grant's office. Rufus had prepared a simple memorandum of understanding. It was not a family document. It was a business contract. It detailed the terms, the bonus structure, and the consequences of failure. It included 2 key clauses. Any dispute would be settled by a binding arbitrator, not a court. And both parties were bound by a strict non-disparagement agreement. No social media posts, no public drama. Caleb read every line. He picked up the pen and signed his name. Your start date, I said, is Monday morning, 7 a.m. Sal will be there to meet you. That evening, I went back to Lydia's. My things were still in the guest room. On the desk was the small wooden auction gavel I had bought from the county clerk as a souvenir. I picked it up, feeling its weight. Then I placed it on the bookshelf, next to a photo of Henry. It was time to build, not break. Monday morning, 7 a.m. Sal's truck was already there when a black sedan I didn't recognize pulled up, blocking the driveway. 2 men in ill-fitting suits got out. I recognized the logo on their breast pockets from the predatory loan agreement. Red Mesa Lending. Caleb, who had just arrived on a beat-up bicycle, froze. This is the property of Caleb Thornton, the first man said, holding up a clipboard. We're here to seize assets against his default. You're mistaken, I said, stepping out from the garage. This is not his property. Lady, we're not interested, the second man said, moving toward the garage. We have a lien. What you have, I said, my voice sharp, is an unsecured personal loan. My company, Cottonwood Ridge Holdings, purchased this property at a county tax auction. This is the recorded deed. This is the certificate of sale. This is the notice of ownership from the land trust. I handed him the file. As he fumbled with the papers, the county constable I had on call pulled up. The first man from Red Mesa saw the uniform and his face went sour. The constable looked at my papers, then at their clipboard. Ma'am's paperwork is valid, the constable said. This property is legally hers. Your beef is with Mr. Thornton, not his mother's company. I suggest you leave the premises. The men from Red Mesa, stripped of their power, looked at Caleb. He just stared at the ground. They got back in their car and left. The work began, but the vultures were still circling. A week later, a flipper, a man I'd seen at the auction, approached me on site. He offered me a significant sum, well over what I'd paid. You bought it smart, I'll give you that, he said. Take the easy money, flip it to me. We're not flipping it, I said, turning back to Sal. We're rebuilding it. The real test came the following Monday. The word was out. When Caleb arrived, he was met by a semicircle of angry men in work boots, the stone mason, the roofer, the electrician. They blocked his path. Where's our money, Caleb? Caleb looked to me, his face pale with panic. I stepped forward. Gentlemen, I said. All eyes turned to me. I am Maeve Thornton, the new owner. Your liens have been settled by my company, but I understand you are also owed wages for work completed. That is a personal debt from Mr. Thornton. I turned to Caleb. This is your one chance. I addressed the men again. I have opened an escrow account. I will fund it, personally. It will pay out your back wages, in installments, as you complete the new work this project requires. But I will not release the first dollar until one condition is met. What condition? The stone mason asked, his arms crossed. He, I said, pointing to Caleb, has to apologize, to each of you, face to face, right now. There were no cameras. There was no live stream. It was just the dry morning air and the smell of cut lumber. Caleb stood there, shaking. He looked at the men whose families he had jeopardized. He looked at me, and then he took a breath. He walked to the stone mason. I am sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I took your work, and I didn't pay you. It was wrong. There's no excuse. He went to each man, one by one. By the time he finished, his face was wet. The contractors were silent. Finally, the stone mason looked at me, then at Caleb, and just nodded. All right, let's see the new plans. The infrastructure inspection passed. The new permits were approved. The Willow Crest HOA, thrilled that their problem property was being fixed, sent a formal thank you note to Cottonwood Ridge Holdings. I signed the master contract with Sal. Caleb, as project manager, began scheduling work, often staying late, coordinating the night crews to make up for lost time. Savannah, I heard, had moved to California 6 months later. Willow Crest Commons opened. The sign was new, the paint was fresh, and the therapy garden was in bloom. I watched as the first residents, men and women in their 70s and 80s, moved their things into the bright, airy rooms that smelled of new wood. One woman, a sharp-eyed lady named Mrs. Petrova put her hand on my arm. "You've done a good thing, dear," she said. "Everyone's son has to grow up eventually." That evening, the building was quiet, settled. Caleb found me in the small office I had set up, the same room where Savannah's safe had been. He was holding a small set of keys. "These are the master overrides," he said. "The backup set. You should have them." He placed them on the desk. "Thank you, Caleb." He paused at the door. "I evicted you from your home," he said, his voice low. "And you gave me a job, a place to fix it. I understand now." He walked out. I was alone. I looked at the wall, which was still bare. I had one box left. From it, I took a simple wooden frame. Inside was a small, grainy photo I had taken from the street on that first day, of the "Property Under New Management" sign. Below it, I had mounted the small auction gavel. I hung it on the wall. I walked to the main control panel, the one that managed the lights for the entire facility. I hit the main switch. The grounds lit up. A warm, safe glow. The house that was built to throw me away had become a haven, and it was my business now. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary and like this video. And if this story moved you, please hit that hype button so more people can hear it.